Helen Moore stared at the calendar hanging on her kitchen wall. The numbers seemed to dance before her misty eyes. 68 years old. It wasn't just another birthday. It was a milestone of 2 years without George, her companion, of 4 decades of marriage. The solitary breakfast had become a ritual of reflection, shared only with Romeo, her tabby cat who had inherited his name from the Shakespearean character at George's suggestion, who loved literature. The house, once full of voices and laughter, now echoed only with the clink of the spoon in the cup and Romeo's occasional purr. The photographs on the walls told stories of a life filled with love, the wedding, the birth of their 3 children, graduations, grandchildren arriving one by one. Helen used to spend hours admiring these memories, but lately, something different happened when she found herself alone with her thoughts. It was a strange tingling, a restlessness she couldn't name. Sometimes she woke up in the middle of the night with her heart racing, dreams that left her blushing and confused. Is this normal? She wondered, as she methodically arranged cleaning products under the sink, a habit she developed after becoming a widow to keep her mind occupied. Her daughter Anna, a dedicated 42-year-old nurse, began to notice subtle changes in her mother's behavior. The more frequent sighs, the lost gaze during Sunday lunches, the way she dressed up more carefully to go to the farmer's market. "Mum, you need to take care of yourself," Anna insisted, making appointments that Helen was reluctant to accept. On that Thursday morning, the coffee ritual was interrupted by the phone ringing. It was Anna, reminding her of the appointment with the gynecologist. Helen felt her face burn. Why a gynecologist at my age? She thought, nervously adjusting the embroidered tablecloth. But something inside her, that same restlessness she had been feeling, said that maybe it was time to break some taboos. On the way to the doctor's office, she met her neighbor Dorothy in the elevator. Tall, elegant, with her 72 years very well lived, Dorothy had always been a source of admiration in the building. A widow for longer than Helen, she seemed to have discovered the secret of eternal youth. Her white hair, always impeccably styled, framed a face that radiated joy for living. "Also going to the doctor, Helen?" Dorothy asked, adjusting the leather bag on her shoulder. The casual encounter in the elevator turned into a ride offered generously. During the trip, the two began a conversation that would forever change the way Helen viewed her own existence. Dr. Rebecca's office was different from anything Helen expected. The walls in soft shades of green conveyed tranquility, and on the shelves were books with titles that caught her attention. Sexuality in the Golden Years, Self-Love and Self-Esteem, Rediscovering Pleasure. On a small coffee table, up-to-date magazines spoke about women's health at all stages of life. The doctor, a young woman of no more than 35, had gentle eyes and a welcoming smile. Her impeccable white coat contrasted with her black hair, tied in an unpretentious bun. "Mrs. Moore, I'm glad you came," she said, indicating the comfortable chair in front of her desk. The consultation began with routine questions about general health, but soon Dr. Rebecca led the conversation into territory Helen had never imagined discussing with anyone. "Have you been feeling any discomfort in your intimate parts? Dryness, itching?" she asked naturally, as if she were talking about blood pressure. Helen, initially tense, gradually relaxed. The doctor explained about the hormonal changes common in menopause and postmenopause. She talked about how the female body continues to produce hormones even after 60, albeit in smaller quantities, and how this affects not only physical health, but also desire and pleasure. "But doctor, at my age, isn't that improper?" Helen asked, nervously twisting the handkerchief between her fingers. The doctor's response was a moment of revelation. "Mrs. Moore, sexuality is part of human life at all stages. Just as you still enjoy good food, a loving hug, or beautiful music, physical pleasure is also your right." The consultation lasted for almost an hour. Dr. Rebecca explained the importance of self-knowledge, how personal touch and pleasure can help prevent health problems, improve blood circulation, and even combat depression and anxiety. She talked about lubricants, pelvic floor exercises, and the importance of maintaining a self-care routine. The LiveWell Senior Community Center was in an adapted old mansion in the city center. Helen hesitated 3 times before crossing the wrought iron gate. The well-tended garden displayed roses of various colors, and the aroma of fresh coffee came from the porch, where some ladies were chatting animatedly. Following Dr. Rebecca's recommendation, She had signed up for the Full Life support group, which met every Wednesday. The discreet name didn't reveal the group's true purpose, discussing sexuality and well-being in the golden years. In the first meeting, Helen discovered she wasn't alone in her doubts and yearnings. Charles, an elegant 75-year-old former university professor, shared his moving story. After losing his wife to cancer, he thought his intimate life was over. "I spent months feeling guilty for still having desires," he confessed, "until I realized that honoring my wife's memory didn't mean stopping living." Mrs. Zelda, an 80-year-old lady with teenage energy, surprised everyone with her frankness. "After I discovered that personal pleasure isn't a sin, I threw away all my sleeping pills," she declared, drawing laughs and murmurs of agreement. She explained how she learned to deal with loneliness through self-knowledge and self-love. The meetings took place in a cozy room, with chairs arranged in a circle. There was always tea, coffee, and homemade cookies, courtesy of Mrs. Maggie, the center's coordinator. The welcoming environment allowed everyone to feel comfortable sharing experiences, doubts, and discoveries. Helen heard stories that made her laugh and cry. She met Judy, who at 85 discovered pleasure for the first time in her life. She met Robert, who after a stroke relearned to deal with his sexuality in a different way. Each story was a testimony that life and pleasure had no age limit. Helen's transformation began subtly. First, it was the decision to buy a full-length mirror for her bedroom. For years, she had avoided seeing her reflection beyond what was necessary to fix her hair and apply lipstick. Now she began to rediscover every inch of her body with new eyes. Her mornings gained a new ritual. After showering, she dedicated a few minutes to observing herself, to lovingly apply moisturizer to each part of her body. She learned to value her curves, her marks, her wrinkles, each telling stories of a life well lived. The wardrobe underwent a transformation. The dark and loose clothes she had worn since George's death were donated. In their place came colorful pieces, soft fabrics that caressed her skin. She bought new lingerie, not to seduce someone, but to feel beautiful for herself. During an afternoon coffee with Dorothy, her friend noticed the changes. "Helen, you're different. Your eyes are shining." It was true. The mirror showed not only physical changes, but an inner glow that had long been dormant. In the privacy of her room, Helen began to explore her body unhurriedly and without guilt. She discovered pleasure points she didn't know existed. She learned to respect her own rhythm, to listen to her desires, to give herself affection and attention. Her sleep improved significantly. Nights of insomnia were replaced by deep, restful sleep. The anxiety that had accompanied her since widowhood began to diminish. Her general practitioner noticed the change in blood pressure levels, which were more controlled. Helen's journey of self-discovery was not without obstacles. One Sunday afternoon, her oldest son, Richard, showed up unannounced and found her reading one of the books recommended by Dr. Rebecca about sexuality in later life. His face reddened and he cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Mom, what are you reading?" he asked, trying to disguise his embarrassment. "Don't you think, well, you don't need that, right?" The way he averted his gaze as if he had caught something shameful hurt Helen's heart. But she was no longer the same woman from months ago. Calmly and with dignity, she explained to her son that she was a complete woman with the right to take care of her health in all aspects. "Son, your mother didn't stop being a woman when she became a widow, nor when she became a grandmother. I have the right to take care of my well-being, and that includes my sexuality." At church, where she had attended the prayer group for decades, she also faced resistance. Some more conservative ladies began to make malicious comments about the support group at the community center. "That's the devil's work," Mrs. Carmen whispered after Mass. Helen found strength in her faith to face prejudices. In a frank conversation with Father John, she explained how self-knowledge and self-love had helped her overcome depression after George's death. The priest, a wise and understanding man, supported her journey. "God gave us a body to be loved and respected," he said. A year after that first consultation with Dr. Rebecca, Helen found herself facing a new challenge, coordinating a discussion group about well-being in later life at the community center. The idea emerged after a particularly moving meeting where several people asked for more information on the topics she addressed so naturally. Her talks, held twice a week, soon became a success. The room, which could accommodate 30 people, was always full. Helen covered diverse topics: self-esteem, body care, pleasure in later life, relationships. Her delicate yet direct way of talking about subjects considered taboo attracted more and more interested participants. The impact of her work began to spread throughout the community. Mrs. Claudia, an 82-year-old lady who barely left her house due to depression, found a new sense of purpose in the meetings. After 3 months of participating in the gatherings, she discontinued her antidepressants with medical supervision and started smiling again. Mr. John, a 77-year-old widower who suffered from chronic insomnia, learned relaxation and self-care techniques that transformed his nights. After I understood that there's no shame in giving pleasure to oneself, I stopped depending on sleeping pills, he shared in one of the meetings. For Helen, the discovery of personal pleasure was just the beginning of a much greater journey. It was as if she had unlocked a door within herself, giving way to a series of other discoveries and possibilities. Her nights, once populated by nightmares and insomnia, became special moments of connection with herself. She learned to create a welcoming environment in her room: scented candles, soft music, silky sheets. Pleasure ceased to be something rushed and hidden, to become a ritual of self-care and self-love. It was during one of the group meetings that she met Albert, a 70-year-old gentleman who caught her attention with his eloquent way of speaking about the importance of self-knowledge in later life. A widower for 5 years, he was a retired literature professor and shared Helen's love for books. The friendship began with conversations after meetings, coffee at the corner bakery, book exchanges, and reading recommendations. Albert had a gentle way of speaking and a look that conveyed understanding. During a walk in the park, when the jabuticaba trees were laden with fruit, he held her hand and said, "It's never too late to start over, Helen." At 69, Helen had become a reference for many seniors in the community. Her carefully planned routine was an example of how to maintain an active and healthy life in later years. Water aerobics on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays in the morning, coordinating the support group on Tuesdays and Thursdays, daily moments of personal pleasure and meditation, weekly outings with Albert exploring parks and museums, Saturday afternoons with grandchildren, teaching them to make homemade bread and telling stories, daily readings on health, well-being, and personal development, bi-weekly meetings with her literature study group, monthly therapeutic massage sessions, regular checkups with Dr. Rebecca for follow-ups. Her apartment, once a sanctuary of solitude, became a space of life and renewal. The curtains, always open, let in sunlight, illuminating the orchid pots, her new hobby. Photos of George still occupied a prominent place, but now shared space with new memories. Portraits of the support group, moments with Albert, smiles with friends from the community center. Helen's journey became an inspiration for many. At her last lecture at the community center, the room was packed. People of different ages came to hear her talk about self-love and sexuality in later life. Among the audience were her children, including Richard, who had learned to respect and admire his mother's new phase. "Pleasure has no age," she said, with a firm and serene voice. "It's our right, a way to keep ourselves alive and healthy. Don't let prejudices steal your joy of living fully. Each of our wrinkles tells a story, each scar carries a lesson, and our bodies, no matter the age, deserve to be loved and respected." Today, when Helen observes the street movement from her window, Romeo is still by her side, but she is no longer alone in her thoughts. Her heart is filled with love, not just love from others, but mainly the self-love she discovered has no expiration date. On her bedside table, a new diary holds her most intimate thoughts. On the first page, she wrote in her careful handwriting, "Life is like a book. No matter the age, there's always a new chapter to be written. And mine is just beginning." Albert, who is now part of her life as a caring companion, often says that she has rejuvenated 10 years since they met. Helen smiles and responds that she hasn't rejuvenated. She just learned to live her age to the fullest, without fear and without shame. Her story continues to inspire other people to rediscover pleasure and self-love in later life. At the community center, there's already a waiting list to participate in her lectures, and other centers in the city have started implementing similar programs. And so, each day, Helen proves that it's never too late to start over, to rediscover oneself, to love oneself. Her journey is a living testimony that happiness and pleasure have no age, One just needs the courage to open their heart to new possibilities.